It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the movies of April 6, 2001. And we've got 4 films to look at today, so let's not waste any more time and just jump on into it. We'll start off with the biggest new release of the weekend, Morgan Freeman and Along Came a Spider. So this is based off of the Alex Cross series by James Patterson. It's actually the second installment of the series. First, of course, the first one was Kiss the Girls, which had Ashley Judd in it back in 1997. And the storyline of this movie is that Alex Cross loses his partner in an out-of-control bust. He stops working and can't forgive himself, and he's drawn back to work reluctantly when the senator's daughter is kidnapped, and the kidnapper seems to want to deal with Alex personally, and I think he can pretty much see where this is going to go from here. The biggest problem with these movies isn't Morgan Freeman as Alex Cross. Far from it. He's probably the best thing about these movies. It's the storyline and the mystery, the aspect that really... They take such a cool character in Alex Cross from the books and just give him nothing to do. There's no grand mystery in this movie that's exciting or engaging. You can pretty much tell who it's going to be right from the get-go, and it's like, where's the fun factor in this movie? Where is the moment in this movie where I'm supposed to be like, hey, this made it all worth it in the end? Even when they did it with Tyler Perry. Like, their first mistake there was casting Tyler Perry over somebody like Idris Elba, who was originally supposed to be in that movie. But then you don't have a good director in Rob Cohen doing that film in particular. And the biggest problem with these movies really is that the mystery is not that engaging or all that interesting. It's a really boring mystery. There's nothing about this that's interesting, and it wastes such good talent all around the board. Freeman, Monica Potter, Dylan Baker's in this movie as well. Michael Moriarty, Penelope Ann Miller, Anna Marie Horsford, Anton Yelchin's in this movie as well. So many good talents in this movie, but they're just wasted because the mystery is not... The mystery or the storyline here just isn't engaging whatsoever. It's dull. It's really a dull movie. So much good talent in this movie wasted on a potential that has a lot of potential to it, but this character never really has transferred well to the big screen, and really it's not because of the character or the actor. It's just the world around him is not that engaging or interesting that would make people want to come back for more of these movies. Even though this one was a slightly successful film, more successful compared to the original film, the original Kiss the Girls, nobody really wanted to go back to this. I really would have liked to see what a good director could really do with Morgan Freeman as Alex Cross, and not what Rob Cohen tried to do with Tyler Perry 11 years later. But we'll eventually get to that one down the road. But this is just not a good movie, and a waste of potential with this character you can work with here. Overall, not a good movie. So let's go ahead and move on to our next film, which is Johnny Depp and Penelope Cruz in Blow. Once again, another movie that has a lot of potential to it, but should have a lot to it, but it just really does not, even though there are those little brief flashes of promise all throughout this. You have a story here where it's based on the real-life stories of a U.S. drug trafficker George Young, played here by Johnny Depp, and his connections, including narcotics king Pablo Escobar and Carlos Zelda Rivas, portrayed in the film as Diego Delgado, and the Medellin cartel. Ted Demme directed this movie. Nick Cassavetes was the co-writer for this. Penelope Cruz is in this film, as well as Frank Potente, Rachel Griffiths, Paul Rubens in a very different role than we're used to seeing him in, and Ray Liotta is also among the cast in here. And this should be a fascinating story to work with here, and it just really isn't. And when it's all said and done, it's a movie that borrows a lot from much better movies. Like you could definitely tell the biggest influences from this. It felt like they were trying to do an amalgamation of both Goodfellas and Boogie Nights, which is what Rotten Tomatoes' consensus actually said it was literally like. Elements seemed borrowed from other movies, from those movies. But again, it's really something that's been done over and over again. There's nothing about it that's gripping or groundbreaking to it. I guess the only real thing that I would say that makes it worth it in the end is seeing Johnny Depp evolve as an actor going forward at this point. I mean, Johnny Depp really is giving it his all with these performances, even though the movies themselves aren't turning out as good as I think they should, considering the films he's attached to. But a strong cast overall, some interesting ideas here and there, but when it's all said and done, the movie just really does not live up to the full potential that it really could. There feels like a lot more could be done with this film in general, and it just doesn't show in this movie. And it's a shame, too, because there is a lot to it that really should make it something worthwhile, and it's just not there, man. It's a real letdown of a movie. You expect so much more from it. There are brief flashes of promise, but it's just not there for me to say I recommend this movie. It's just, and unfortunately, it's not. So, yeah, another disappointment there. So that is Blow. Let's go ahead and move on to probably the best movie that came out this weekend, and yet it was one of the biggest flops that came out that weekend. Pokemon 3, the movie, Spell of the Unknown. So in this film, you have a professor, and it's Professor Shuri, who's a scientist looking for rare Pokemon. He reads a storybook to his daughter Mii about the powerful Pokemon Entei, and Shuri is currently searching for the hieroglyph Pokemon the Unknown, which are literally called the Unknown. And while searching through some of these ancient artifacts, Shuri awakens the Unknown and is sucked into it. Mii next awakens Unknown while looking for her father, and Unknown bonds with her and turns her mansion into a crystal tower. The crystallization begins to spread. Unknown lives to serve Mii and creates an Entei with the personality of her father to make her happy. When Mii next deserves a mother, Entei kidnaps Pokemon as Ash's mother to give to her. And so Ash, Misty, and Brock, who was back with this one, that's the one thing. That's the weird thing about Pokemon at this point. Let me just finish this up real quick. So Ash, Misty, and Brock, of course, and of course Pikachu set out to get her back. And yeah, like I said, this was a weird point in time because they made a big deal in like late '99, early 2000 about Brock leaving the Pokemon and being replaced by Tracy. In fact, the second movie has Tracy in there, and you see Brock in there for a little bit of a cameo. And then Brock comes back into the picture. Tracy that is no longer around here anymore. It's a weird situation going on here, and that's probably because of the way that Pokemon was kind of going at this point in terms of the American audience's appreciation for Pokemon, because by this point, it wasn't where it was almost 18 months ago. Because by this point in time, the Johto Journey was I think taking place. I think this takes place at the end of the third season of the show. And by that point, Pokemon was not the big success that it was a couple years prior to this. And audiences were really kind of really losing their love for this, because this thing crashed and burned at the box office. It was not a massive hit here in the U.S. It was a hit overseas, but it provided less of a significant box office compared to the other films of the series. But then again, you had a much better family film coming out at the time with Spy Kids, and the film didn't really do as well as people wanted to, and it ended up having Warner Brothers basically letting Pokemon go off to another studio. For a while, it was actually a couple films released by Disney under Miramax when they still owned Disney. But this film in particular, the craziest thing about this whole thing is that despite the box office numbers being bad, the appeal of Pokemon dropping at this point, this is probably the best Pokemon movie they've done. I mean, it's a heavy storyline. It really does have a heavy flow to it. I mean, the storyline about the little girl and this professor who, it's really heartfelt when you really watch this movie. I mean, there's no real villains in this movie. There are no dangerous. There's nothing like extravagant in this movie. Like one person has to be this one to rise to the occasion, but it's just a story about something that happens, and you really do get invested in the storyline of this movie, and you do get really invested in the characters, and the Pokemon characters in this movie feel like real characters in this movie. I feel like these movies got better and better right after the first movie. The second one showed a lot of showed a lot of promise to it. And this is the one where it looks like a simple Pokemon storyline. It doesn't feel like it needs to be too big or too extravagant for its own good. It only needs to be bigger when it needs to be bigger. And they do a pretty good job of expanding the animation in this movie. This one's probably got the best overall animation in general in this particular movie. And it really does show in here. There's a lot of moments in here that still kind of hold up pretty well for a film that's over 20 years old. You do get invested in the storyline. You do get invested in the battles, which actually feel like real-life Pokemon battles and don't feel like something that has to be overblown and over the top or anything. But it leads to a lot of awesome things. And sadly, really, nobody went to go see this movie, which is a shame, because they really did miss out on something special with this film. This is actually a well-made movie that really does feel like the best of what a Pokemon movie should be like. It also helps that you have a lot of great voice work in this particular movie, not just from, of course, the original the English cast of Pokemon, Veronica Taylor, Rachel Lillis, Eric Stewart, but you also have Dan Green, who would later go on to be a significant part of Yu-Gi-Oh!, playing Entei in this movie, and he is very good in this performance. Like, you really do buy the connection between him and Molly, who's the little girl in here. I think when I read the plot description for this, it was actually the Japanese version of it, because I said like Shuri, and he's actually named Sully in the English dub, and Molly, Spencer in the English version, and Molly in the English version as well. But it's a really solid storyline, and you really do get invested in it. And there is a lot about this movie that works compared to the other Pokemon movies. Like, this one works the best out of all of them, and it's hilarious how this is the best one, and yet nobody went to go see it because they were just kind of done with Pokemon at this point. I mean, the zeitgeist had kind of died down pretty quickly, and like I said, there's still a ton of movies that have yet to be released, and I don't think any of them ever come close to what this movie was able to do. I still think this probably is the best overall Pokemon movie, and it's one that sadly nobody really knows about for the most part. Like, nobody went to go see it. I'm hoping that it has found an audience over time through like DVD and videos and all that, but that probably did, and I think a lot of people would agree that this would be easily the best of the three movies, no question about it. But if you have not seen this one, I'd say definitely check it out, because it's definitely much better than a lot of people gave it credit for. I think a lot of people missed out on something really special when this came out. Not much more to say about that one, Pokemon 3 the movie. So let's go ahead and move on to our last movie, which is Christina Applegate in Just Visiting. So we've actually kind of talked about some of these movies, the Visitor films. This is actually a American remake of this movie, and you have a knight and his valor, the knight once again played by Jean Reno, who are plagued by a witch, and to repair the damage they make use of the service of a wizard, played here by Malcolm McDowell. Something goes wrong, and they're transported from the 12th century to the year 2000, where they meet some of the knight's family, and slowly learns what the future is like. In order to return to the 12th century and deal with the witch, they begin to look for a wizard. And along the way, they have Christina Applegate as one of the people that helps them, and Gavin Belson from Silicon Valley. Matt Ross is in this movie. And Kelsey Grammer also does a narration, too. You also have Tara Reid in here. Brigitte Wilson, George Plimpton, Malcolm McDowell was the wizard, Alexis Lorette, Christian Calver. Like I said, a lot of the people from The Visitors is in this movie. Written by John Hughes. A lot of people don't realize that, but this was John Hughes' This is a film that John Hughes wrote, and, he's a guy that was notoriously known for writing under pseudonyms like Edmond Dantes, and yet he decided to keep his name on this. Maybe he thought this was going to be a big hit, and, sadly it wasn't. Not here in the U.S. or even in France when these movies were popular. And also of note, this is the last film Hollywood Pictures put out before they eventually folded into Touchstone Pictures and then were later revived in 2006. Which, granted, probably is a hell of a way to go out with a terrible movie like this. But here's a funny story about this movie. You want to know how big of a disaster this was? This was released on DVD on September 11th, 2001. Maybe not funny, but it's amusing how the last movie Hollywood Pictures put out before they shut down came out on one of the most tragic days in history, but I digress. And honestly, I think the biggest problem with the movie in general was that it didn't really try that hard to introduce this to American audiences where they can find a way to get into it, even if they had never seen the other movies. It felt like you had to see the other movies, the Visitor films before this, before you can actually really delve into what this movie was trying to do here. And I think that was probably their biggest mistake overall. It just wasn't a good movie, and these are very talented people in this film, but it never feels like they really meant this to be something more than just... It felt like more of another sequel rather than an actual remake. If they had tried to establish the story better compared to what they do in this movie, maybe they could have had something here. But sadly, it's not the case, and it's a real disappointment too. It's a lot of potential went into this movie, but it just never really came up as well as I think they wanted it to. And like I said, so much potential went into it, but just not enough to make it work. So yeah, that's Just Visiting for you. And so with that said, we wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies. We'll take a look at 4 more movies on the next episode, including Renee Zellweger in Bridget Jones's Diary. We also have David Spade in Joe Dirt. We have the movie Kingdom Come, and also the live-action remake of Josie and the Pussycats. So we'll take a look at those 4 movies on the next episode. But until then, thank you so much for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, hit the playlist on the next page, check out the previous episode, and also don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this on this channel. So with that said, I'm off. I will see you guys next time, and until then, as always, take care.